My name is Elena, and for 8 years I was the silent engine behind my husband David's meteoric rise in the corporate world while I sacrificed my own career as a senior software architect to raise our daughter and manage our home. I spent my nights helping him write his presentations and my days networking with influential people to secure him promotions, because I believed we were a team, building a future together. On our 8th wedding anniversary, I prepared a candlelit dinner and waited for him to return with the news of his vice presidency, but instead he walked in with a cold look in his eyes and a divorce petition in his hand. David told me that he had outgrown our marriage and that he was now engaged to Chloe, the 24-year-old daughter of his CEO, because she could offer him the social status and power that a housewife like me never could. His parents, who I had cared for during their illnesses, stood behind him and told me that I should be grateful for the years of luxury they provided, and that I should leave the house immediately with nothing but my personal belongings. They had secretly moved all our joint assets into a trust fund under David's name months ago, leaving me with zero balance in my bank account. I stood there in my kitchen watching the man I loved treat me like a piece of expired trash while his mother laughed and said that a woman who doesn't work is easily replaceable. I walked out of that house at midnight clutching my daughter's hand and my old laptop with a heart that had shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces of ice. I checked into a cheap motel and realized that they had made one fatal mistake. They forgot that before I was David's wife, I was the lead developer of the very software system that their entire company was built upon. The next 2 years were a period of intense labor and absolute secrecy as I moved back into the tech world under my maiden name, Elena Thorne, and used my insider knowledge to find every single bug and inefficiency in my ex-husband's company's infrastructure. I lived in a small apartment working 20 hours a day and survived on caffeine and the memory of David's smirk as I built a competing platform that was 10 times faster and more secure. I reached out to venture capitalists who had been burned by David's arrogance, and I secured a $50 million investment to launch Thorne Systems. While David was busy posting photos of his lavish wedding with Chloe and bragging about his new lifestyle, I was quietly signing contracts with his biggest clients who were tired of his company's failing service. I didn't spend a penny on luxury. I reinvested everything back into the business until Thorne Systems became a multi-billion-dollar giant that was systematically swallowing the market share of David's firm. I watched from my new corporate headquarters as David's company's stock price began to plummet because they couldn't compete with my innovation. David's CEO, who was now his father-in-law, became desperate and put the company up for sale to avoid total bankruptcy. I used a shell company to place a bid that was so high nobody could refuse, and I waited for the day the papers would be signed. I was no longer the broken woman in the kitchen. I was now the most powerful woman in the industry, and I was ready to reclaim everything that was stolen from me and more. The day of the merger arrived, and David, along with his CEO and his parents, gathered in the grand boardroom to meet the mysterious owner of the company that had saved them from ruin. David was wearing his most expensive suit, trying to look important, while Chloe complained about the lack of premium champagne in the room. When I walked through those double doors, the silence was so sudden, you could hear the heartbeat of everyone in the room. David's jaw hit the floor and his mother's face turned gray as they realized the replaceable housewife was now their boss. I sat at the head of the table and placed the original divorce papers next to the new acquisition contract. I looked at the CEO and told him that while I would keep the company, I had no room for incompetent staff who let their personal lives ruin a business. I officially fired David and his aide's father-in-law on the spot and informed them that the luxury penthouse and the company cars they were using were now my property and must be returned by sunset. David's parents tried to beg for mercy and reminded me that we were once family, but I looked them in the eye and told them that family doesn't throw their own out on the street at midnight. I watched as security escorted them out of the building while Chloe screamed about her lost inheritance. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt a profound sense of peace because I had proven that my worth was never defined by a man or a marriage. I turned the company into a sanctuary for single mothers, providing them with high-paying jobs and childcare because I wanted to ensure no other woman would ever feel as vulnerable as I did that night. I am Elena Thorne, and I didn't just survive the betrayal. I bought the empire and built a throne of my own.